NRA TV with Grant Stinchfield.
Well, hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. So statistics are like lampposts. For drunks, that is. You can always find one to hold you up if you need it. That's the case with gun deaths and the left's infatuation to somehow prove guns are bad. The latest statistic being tossed around by the anti-gunners is that U.S. gun deaths rate in the United States rose by 17% since 2008. The number is true, but the anti-gun media fails to put that number in perspective. In 2008, just 5 million guns were manufactured. By 2016, that number rose to 11 million per year, by the way, more than doubling the number of new firearms in America. When you compare the number of gun deaths to the number of guns, new guns that is, in America, the number of gun deaths in America drops almost in half. The rate, that is. That's right. The rate of gun deaths in America drops by almost 50% when you sell more guns. You see, the bottom line here isn't about how many people are needlessly killed by people with guns. Notice I said killed by people with guns. Guns can't rise up on their own and kill people. It's to expose the fact that statistics can prove whatever you want them to prove. My goal is to have zero needless gun deaths in America related to firearms, but that's not why we need to be taking guns away from good people. It's about taking them away from bad people. It's about tough-on-crime judges and proactive policing, all things liberal so-called leaders hate, much to the detriment of the people they represent. Well, a Nevada rancher versus big government. You probably remember the story. The fight is now over, for now at least. On Monday, a federal judge set Cliven Bundy free. It all started 4 years ago when Bundy and his sons refused to pay federal grazing fees and stared down government agents in an armed standoff outside the Nevada ranch. The Bundys dared the federal government to arrest them. The government did, charging them with a range of felonies, throwing the book at them. Well, Larry Klayman is the attorney for Freedom Watch, and he joins us now to talk more about this victory. Larry, great to have you on the program.
You too. Good to see you.
So, Larry, I've always said Cliven Bundy is not really a sympathetic martyr in all of this. I think some of his behavior was out of bounds. But when you look at the case and what the BLM did and what agents did, it clearly becomes very, very clear that the government was overreaching. And basically sticking it to the citizens, where it was really a warning that we all should be fearful of this government. Am I wrong on that?
Grant, you're right in the latter part. I'm going to invite Bill in the next few weeks you can come, because you'll see that the Bundys are a very peaceful family. They're Mormons. They believe in the Constitution. It's incorporated under the way they believe into the Book of Mormon. They are true patriots. And I spent a lot of time with Cliven over the last 2 years. I visited him over 25 times in federal prison in Pahrump, Nevada. He was not violent. They never carried a firearm throughout this entire confrontation. When people saw around the country that the Bundys were being beaten up, that their cattle was being killed and buried in a mass grave, they came armed using their Second Amendment rights. And they're probably all members of the NRA, proudly so, as I am, because they didn't want to get hurt. But what happened here in the course of the trial, and there were prior trials with other defendants, is that we found that the government actually had a kill list, the Bureau of Land Management, on the Bundys. They hung pictures of them on the wall with targets with X's as if they had already been killed. They had sent snipers out to the ranch before anything ever started. The U.S. attorney in Las Vegas, Nevada came out there. It was an entrapment to try to provoke the Bundys so they could charge them. And the whole issue of grazing fees is a complete charade as well, because those grazing fees are not legally owed to the Bureau of Land Management. In fact, we're going to be filing a complaint for declaratory relief in Nevada State Court, asking the court to rule that the land belongs to the state of Nevada and the people of Nevada, not the federal government. Now, let me just add one other thing. I know I'm a little long-winded here, but the media that's come out of the left distorts everything. The reality here is that the Bundys, if they had paid grazing fees, if they had signed the contract with the Bureau of Land Management, which was being run by the hand-picked henchman of Harry Reid, that corrupt former senator from Nevada, that the regulations, the environmental regulations, could have literally regulated how the Bundys' cows could eat, and right down to the last bush. They raise on 400,000 acres of land in and around Lake Mead. It's desert. There's not much food. So if they had paid the grazing fees and signed the contract with the Bureau of Land Management, they would have been signing their own economic death warrant. And that's why they never paid the grazing fees. So, you know, I would like you to meet the Bundys because it's a really great human interest story. You'll fall in love with this family. They're true patriots. They were willing to do life imprisonment on a principle. They didn't think they'd ever be convicted because they have a faith in God,
well,
the Heavenly Father.
Larry, there's so many issues at play here. And the first issue becomes, all right, if you go under the assumption that it's federal land, which Cliven Bundy doesn't want to go under the assumption, then that means it's my land too. And then you could also say that, well, if it's my land and everybody else is paying grazing fees, then shouldn't he be forced to pay grazing fees?
That's a good question, Grant. The others weren't paying grazing fees either. They just simply went out of business, most of them. They said, the heck with it. We're not going to stand up to the BLM. They're too powerful. We quit. There are very few ranchers left in Nevada. Cliven's the biggest one, and very few left in the West. And President Trump's been very sympathetic of the plight of the ranchers in the West. He denationalized parts of Utah, the Escalante National Monument there. He may do the same in Nevada with the Gold Butte National Monument. And the hard fact here is that most ranchers didn't pay the grazing fees. They simply quit.
All right. So the other issue here is what the government did, and you talked a little bit about it, to go after the Bundys. And I looked at some of this case. One, the judge ruled that the agents acted with, quote, incredible bias. Now, no federal agent should act with incredible bias. Anybody they are investigating, if you go under the assumption that you're innocent until proven guilty. The agents used terms like Bundy and his supporters were deplorables, rednecks, idiots, and their Mormon beliefs. All things agents shouldn't be. Could have been instrumental in the trial, which is probably the reason for the mistrial.
That's right. They did all that, and the prosecutors, acting U.S. attorney at the time, he's since been removed, Stephen Myre, lied to the judge. You got to remember, this was a Obama-appointed judge recommended by Harry Reid, who put his hand-picked chief of staff in as head of BLM to conduct this paramilitary raid. And yes, they did all those things, and worse, they called the Bundys retards. They had the kill list, like I said. They had snipers. They withheld information about surveillance in and around the Bundy Ranch, which would have shown that the Bundys were not armed. They never were armed. And thank God, I give a little advertisement to the NRA, of which I'm a proud member, and you, Grant. Thank God for the NRA. Thank God for the Second Amendment, because if those people had not come armed, the sheriff of Clark County could not have convinced the federal government to leave. There would have been a bloodbath. It would have been another Ruby Ridge or Waco.
Well,
thank God for the Second Amendment.
I do believe you're correct on that. And truthfully, the guns in this case is what resulted in somehow the issue being mediated, at least out there, with no bloodshed happening, except, of course, that traffic stop. That's another story to get into at another time. The other issue in all of this, Larry, is the issue of environmental extremists literally weaponizing the spotted owl, weaponizing the tortoise, and going under the assumption that when we have national parks, that somehow they mean an amusement park. Never was the national park system meant to be an amusement park. It was always meant not for the conservation of animals, but to be places where, one, economy could flourish, fiber, minerals, energy needs, all of those things were what the national public lands were set aside for. And yet, I believe these animal extremists have hijacked it, and the Bundy family got caught in the middle of all of that.
You're right, and they're continuing. Right after the Bundy's indictment was dismissed with prejudice, these radical environmental groups, first of all, said, oh, the only reason that Bundy was, in effect, acquitted was because he's a white person. I mean, who says something like that? These people are crazy. Then they advocated BLM go back in a paramilitary raid and take over the ranch and provoke something yet again. These people are not interested in the desert tortoise. You know, in this case, the tortoise did not overtake the hare in the end, okay? The desert tortoise, which is, of course, one of the issues, lives off the cattle. It eats the cow manure. It likes to be around the cows. It had nothing to do with real environmental concerns. But the Bureau of Land Management, the way they regulate and the way they were under Obama, taking up the cause of these radical environmentalists, literally regulated to the point where they would tell the Bundys, what bush the cows could eat at, and there's not much to eat. And that's why, Cliven, in addition to the fact that constitutionally the federal government does not own the land, it's the state. And we know courts make mistakes, and they do it on purpose more and more.
Well, clearly,
every day.
And in Nevada, about 80% of the land in Nevada is publicly owned, which then poses a great challenge to the ranchers, especially if the government's going to act in the way that it did. You add in they call it the green movement, I call it animal extremists. They're literally choking off commerce. And that's what they've done to the Bundys. And as you said, you've got ranchers going out of business in the West because of this. It's a mess. Larry, where does the case now go from here?
Case now goes, well, we still have two Bundys, Mel and Dave, who were in the third set of defendants to be tried. Their indictment should be dismissed as well on the same grounds. We'll be filing next week a complaint for declaratory judgment in the Nevada State Court. I dare a Nevada judge to rule that the land belongs to the federal government and not the people of Nevada. So we're hopeful of that. And then, of course, we're considering right now cases for malicious prosecution and civil rights violations. That's put under consideration by Cliven. Cliven's my client. I've also helped the rest of the family. So that's where we're going right now. And also there are possible hearings in Congress. I'm in Washington today about the overreach of the Bureau of Land Management. I met with the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee yesterday, Mr. Bishop, Congressman Bishop, and also Mark Amate, who is one of the congressmen from Nevada on that panel. And I hope that Congress will step in to prevent a tragedy from happening out there, not just in Bunkerville, but with other ranchers throughout the West.
Well, I know that after the actions of these agents were exposed, the bias actions of the agents were exposed of going after American citizens, and a mistrial occurred, Attorney General Jeff Sessions says he's going to launch an investigation into what actually went down in the conducting of that investigation as well. So, Larry, we'd love to get Cliven Bundy on the program if you could make that happen. It would be an interesting conversation, and we'd love to talk to him.
I'm sure I can do that. His two sons are extremely articulate, Ryan and Ammon, as well as Dave and Mel. So I'm sure they would welcome the chance to come on and talk to you, see if we can arrange that.
All right. Well, we appreciate your friendship with this program. We always enjoy talking to you. It's never, it's always an interesting conversation, to say the least, when we got Larry Klayman on. So thank you, buddy. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely. And thank you for your support for the NRA as well. All right. We need to get it tougher on college campuses. The PC culture is out of control, and we are not preparing our young people to face the real world. We say that over and over again on this program. We need more professors to fight back. We know of at least one, Mike Rechtenwald of New York University. He got a ridiculous amount of backlash after starting a Twitter account called Anti-PC New York Prof. Now he's suing his employer and 4 colleagues for defamation.
Is it worth it to go through all this?
Yes, because somebody has to do it. If it's not me, who's going to be? Because this has got to be stopped. We're losing our culture. We're losing our universities. We're losing intellectual freedom, freedom of speech, academic freedom, all of it.
And they certainly are. Not just professors who think with a conservative mindset, there are very few of them left out there, but certainly students who do as well. One recent student who we talk to often about these issues is Peter Van Voorhees. Peter, it's great to have you on the program. We got audio from Peter? Peter, great to have you on the program.
Great to be with you.
All right, so what do you make of the professor from New York University? I think the kids there in New York, in Greenwich Village, the heart of Manhattan, are lucky to have a professor like that. I think the school, the university, doesn't think like I do.
No doubt about that, Grant. I mean, this guy, seriously, I would give him a huge round of applause. This guy is a hero. The fact
is it worth it
he's willing to go on national TV and say this, that he's willing to be so public about it, this guy's brave. He's risking his job. He's risking his career. And that's the current state of affairs that we find ourselves in. If you disagree with the liberal left, if you disagree with anything that they say, you're a target, and you're suddenly someone who they do not want to essentially teach their students anymore. That's how closed their supposedly open and liberal mindset is.
You know, I would say there's no coincidence that when we often hammer away at most of these colleges and universities, we focus on colleges in California, and now no coincidence one in New York. But the reality is this kind of behavior is happening all across America, straight through the heartland as well.
Oh, of course. I mean, we've seen it at Evergreen College up in Washington, where they had essentially a no whites allowed day. And you had a very, very left-leaning professor who identified as a socialist. He's suddenly coming out for free speech on these college campuses. Same thing at UC Berkeley. You're having some professors agree with what the college Republicans are doing, and across the country. And I think what's really powerful here is that you're having all of these professors who maybe they're not even right-leaning. Maybe they're left-leaning. They're in the majority, but they say, look, this is wrong. Colleges and universities are supposed to be a place for the free exchange of ideas, and they've only become an echo chamber for one point of view. And those are the few. Those are really the brave few that realize that it's wrong, and they're willing to stand up with the little guy, which is the right-leaning students and professors and faculty on these campuses.
You know, I'll tell you, it is important, Peter, that folks like you, and I know you work over at the Washington Examiner, which is a great publication online. You should read it and read Peter's work. But places like NRA TV and other outlets to stand by professors like this, because they don't have backing from the mainstream media. The mainstream media will come out and slam these guys. Truthfully, I think they're real heroes in this fight against the politically correct world that we now face ourselves.
Oh, there's really no doubt about it. And I'm very thankful for NRA TV, for Fox News, for the Washington Examiner, for all these other outlets that are willing to stand up and get the message out, because the mainstream media, they would love to ignore it. They would love to tell you that all is just fine and dandy on these college campuses. And the fact is, it's not. I've experienced it. Pretty much every student, whether they're right or left-leaning, has experienced the echo chamber that is the modern university. And it's critical that we get the word out, because if the public doesn't know, if the public doesn't realize, hey, when you're spending $250,000 to send your kid to college, this is what you're getting, you're not going to get real change until people understand that. So I think it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, it is. And Peter Van Voorhis, we appreciate you helping spreading the message. Thank you, buddy. I know it's early out there where you are. We thank you for coming on the program.
Great to be with you as always, Grant.
All right, absolutely. Somebody else we love having on the program is Chuck Holton, veteran Army Ranger. He will join me at the top of the next hour. Stick around for that. Thanks for watching.
You're watching NRA TV with Grant Stinchfield.